Okay. In this next section, I asked the question, does the topic of distance education have any underlying sociological issues? I feel the answer is yes. And the reason that I say that is that throughout this master's program, we have learned a lot of different things in regard to distance education that I feel really are broader sociological issues that can be expanded into the topic of all of education, or even something even larger than that. The first of these is the Education for All initiative. Um, I really feel, and this is United Nations kind of idea, that we should be providing education to everyone, and that we should be monitoring it and making sure that everyone has equal access to education in the world, or better access, eventually ending in equal access. Um, I like this idea, I really do, because I personally think that education is liberating and that it can stabilize societies if given the chance. I really think that distance education is not exclusively promoting this, but it definitely is it's a major theme in a lot of the literature that I've read about distance education, that you can provide this education to people who don't have it. It's very positive, and I really do like that about distance education, that it does try to take some of these ideas, these really large ideas, and it tries to implement them. So definitely appreciate that. The next thing that I really feel needs to be talked about is spreading culture. If you are in a scenario where, as a distance educator, you're creating these classes that are going to be given to other people, you really have to be careful, because usually the places that are creating distance education, the countries and universities, they're from the more developed nations that have more wealth, and it's a difficult issue to touch on, because sometimes the people that you're providing this education to from the smaller countries, they have a very distinct way of life, they have a distinct culture, and they don't maybe not necessarily want to have their culture influenced by some of the outside ideas. So I think that really you have to be very careful when you start broadcasting your classes to everyone, because I think that you really have to try to respect the local cultures that you're trying to help. I think that with globalization, we really are moving towards the creation of kind of a world culture that it's gonna be more countries are going to be aligned with a specific mentality. And I mean, if you can see that now, if you go to Europe or if you go to some other countries, they're definitely much more similar to the United States than they used to be. I was just in Japan 3 months ago, and I mean, almost every corner that I saw, there was a Starbucks there. I mean, so this is happening outside of distance education, but I do think that we have to be mindful of it, because some people don't like the intrusion into their culture that we can accidentally put into classes, or whatever we do. Finally, I want to talk about the idea of constructivism in distance education. Distance education is really has a foundation in constructivism, and what this is that constructivist education, it's kind of like you give the student the building blocks that they need in order to assemble the final product, the knowledge that you want them to have, and in that way they have ownership of the process and they develop it on their own, and it works, it really does. But what I feel is interesting to talk about in regard to this subject is that regular live conventional education is starting to like this idea as well. So I think that it's benefiting distance education that live classes and school districts and universities that are not using distance education are also latching onto this idea, because to be honest with you, since our ideologies are more in alignment now, I think that it's making distance education more palatable, because we're using the same processes as these other educational entities are. So I think that it's definitely paving the way for the advancement of distance education. So these are three sociological issues that I feel are kind of important to the topic of distance education, so I just wanted to touch on them on this website.